Let's look again specifically at this idea of if the issue of vaccination is a plausible cause of autism, because it has really been very controversial since this first came out. I can't exactly remember. I remember personally one of the first things I heard about it was like watching some news, maybe even like a TV talk show, and Jenny McCarthy was on there. And I'm not sure, you guys are probably so young, some of you might not even know who that was. And she was just kind of like this person that used to be on MTV. I think she might be an actress. She's played in different TV, maybe even movies. Anyway, well known to a lot of us probably that were raised in the 90s and early 2000s. Anyway, so she was plausible. She was very well known. I'm not saying like intellectually, she's not a researcher by any means, but anyway, she came out and said, my son was normal, but then he got these shots and he is now has autism. And she started, maybe not only her, but she started this huge thing of many people that just trusted her just because of her fame, saying, I'm not going to vaccinate my child because Jenny McCarthy says that when she did this, her son got autism. And she wrote a book, and she did a lot of, what do I want to say, like press things about that book. And now, listen, I'm not trying to bag on Jenny McCarthy, because as a mom, if that's really what your gut was telling you, I'd be screaming it from the rooftops too, right? But the reality is she didn't have any research to back that claim. Again, I'm not saying honestly that's the sole cause. There's probably more stir around it. But that's how I remember it going down. And it was like, geez Louise, this Jenny McCarthy lady said it, and boom, it's gospel truth to many people. And so, in the last 10 to 15 years, this has been really looked at. I wanted to give you an opportunity to look more into this. And so, for some extra credit, I want you to go on to the Blackboard course, and there'll be a journal available to you where you can go in, and I want you to post evidence that either supports the claim or that undermines the case that it's false. So it needs to be from a peer-reviewed journal, and I want you to title that ASD and vaccination, so I know, oh, they're giving me some more information about this. My opinion from my review of the research is that it is not a possible cause. However, that's why it's saying here, if there is evidence that undermines the case that I'm stating, that there is a possible cause, show it to me. And otherwise, if not, I want you to do the work of going and finding the evidence that you don't think it's the cause. Because here's the thing, parents often turn to their special education teacher in these times and say, what do you think? And so I think it's really important that we don't just give them an opinion, because everyone's opinions come from personal experiences. And what a parent, I feel like, deserves is something very objective that says, well, here is the best I can tell you is what has been researched, not just my opinion. And so I want you to have some of that information under your belt going into teaching, because that will best serve those families and those kids. Any questions about this extra credit? Email me. There's a link in your Blackboard content for this unit, essentially, that says extra credit, and that's what it's referring to, is this slide here about vaccination. Moving on, I already had shared with you some of this, but specific eligibility criteria for autism in Missouri. It happens after the age of 3. It has to be conducted with an evaluation that includes the review of medical records. It's very observational, an observation of the child's behavior, but across multiple environments, an in-depth social history. And then the following behaviors are documented: disturbances of speech, language, cognitive, and nonverbal communication, disturbance of the capacity to relate appropriate to people, events, or objects. The condition adversely affects educational performance. That's across the board with any eligibility in any state, but we have to say, okay, it's affecting them, they're here, and that's why we're going to prove that they need a service through the public school. and that the autism is not a result of an emotional disability as defined. But I was mentioning the suggested criteria. So these aren't technically criteria that you have to list, but these are ones we highly encourage you to look at because they're going to inform your planning and programming. Does that bottom one, of course, how do they respond to sensory information, stimuli, but also the disturbance of developmental rates and sequences. This is coming, it's very common. If I'm taking an intake on a child, I used to be on an evaluation team for 3 to 5 year olds with a special education teacher and a school psychologist. And we're kind of in this little team and we'd get a case and then we'd have to do an intake, right? Someone would call and kind of get that in depth social history. Many times it would go something like this. I'd be asking questions about typical child development. In two major areas, it came up a lot. It was kind of a red flag in language, where they'd be like, well, yeah, up until 18 months, they met all these milestones, and then it just stopped or it reversed. And the other area would be if a little older kids, yeah, they were 3 years old, excuse me, they were fully potty trained, and all of a sudden it's like they forgot how to go, like it reversed. They started having lots of accidents and they weren't using the toilet anymore. And I couldn't tell you the science behind why that happens, but those are very common disturbances of developmental rates and sequences where they were on this trajectory and they kind of just reversed or stopped. And so those things are definitely